And I believe we're live now. So, good afternoon, happy quarantine, and welcome to Voron Live. So, for those of you just joining us, this is where we get a bunch of the Voron designers and other community admins and the like to jump in and talk about what we're doing, what we've been up to, and maybe just the state of 3D printing in general. Experimenting with a slightly new format now, so if you watched a previous one, it may be a little bit different, but so we've got a really great panel to talk things today. So we're gonna kind of go around the horn and introduce ourselves. I'll kind of start off, as I said, I'm Doc, Doc Jeeves on the Discord. So this is kind of my little baby along with PIF. But from there, I'll go to Timit.
Unmute helps. I'm Timit99. I was here back in the Slack days, and I've been doing recently a lot of circuit board work. So Voron Expander, working on some other modified displays and stuff in the background, and a little bit of dev testing here and there. I'll go up to Nemgria.
All right. I'm Nemgria. First time on Voron Live, so pretty excited about that. Pumped to talk about some of the cool stuff we got going on today. Who wants to go next?
Eddie, you want to go? Eddie?
Sure, I'll go. Yeah, I'm also a new member of the Voron team, so this is my first Voron Live as well. So yeah, I'm here to talk about some of the things I've been working on as well, but I'm on the engineering team, so.
So, Durednu, how about you?
Hey, Durednu. Same as Timit, kind of been here since the Slack days, mainly on V2 printers, built 4 of them, and did a lot of work on documentation, which you guys have been taking advantage of, and I'd love to see more contributions in there. Great to be here. Thanks for joining us.
And now I guess I have to go to the Canada crew. So, Taylor, Uber Nero, how about you first, since you're front and center?
Okay, name's Uber Nero, YouTube's Nero 3D Pre. My name's Taylor. I do the tutorial videos that some of you guys may have seen. I do a lot of the just hardware testing behind the scenes. I'm not much of a designer. I work in injection molding, so I have a bit of background on this stuff, but normally I'm just breaking stuff behind the scenes and putting hours on machines. And of course, the other important Canadian, I'll pass it on to Andre now.
Important. Hi, I'm Andre Q on the Discord. I'm mostly the cheap guy and try to find the cheap parts so you guys don't go crazy with the budget.
He does an amazing job searching Ali for guys who don't understand. He can find anything.
Yeah.
Oh, we lost you there. But yeah, otherwise I've been there since Slag's days. I'm just an old fart now. I'll go with whoever's left. I see 10 pack. It's your time to shine.
Can't hear you, 10. Can't hear you.
Okay, that's a great start. I'm Tin, or Tin Fets, and I'm fairly new, not completely new. I've been working on some background stuff. Maybe we'll see some of it today. Yeah. And I'll pass on to Fold.
Yes, hi. I'm Fold. I've been there for, forever. I'm responsible for the Cura profiles in 4.5, and that's about it. I annoy people on Discord.
I will say it is really cool to see all the new faces come in, but also have Andre, Doc, Uber, Folk, everybody who's been from the Slack days and dealt with V1.0 and building that, and then just pestering RCF with dozens and dozens of questions and rebuilds and stuff, and seeing how everybody. Some people went out, some people came in, and yeah, it's pretty cool to have this group of guys who none of us have basically ever met in person. I think I've met 2 people from Voron Group, but it's still a really cool community to have. My fiance always mentions that it's weird when I have my computer friends, but it especially in quarantine, it works out pretty well.
And we should talk about that. It's such a shame we couldn't do Midwest because we were all planning to be at Midwest this year. So hopefully next year we'll get the gang together.
Yeah, I keep getting all these notifications and reminders, and it's depressing. Flights out and hotel reservations, and
I was ready for the booth and for saying hello to everyone, but no luck this time.
We'll make it work. It'll come back. I got a voucher for my flight, so whether or not MRRF ever happens, I'm definitely flying out there, and we'll do something.
Drink beer and break printers.
And I should say there's one guy missing, the main man. He'll be with us shortly. Don't worry.
Yeah, trust me. We wouldn't do one of these without him. So I think, how about we start, Eddie? I know you've got some stuff up your sleeves, and you've got a giant black box behind you. So you want to talk about that?
Sure, sounds good. I just want to give a little bit of a context back, how I found about Voron. Back in, I forget what year it is, right when the v2.0 STLs were released, I was looking to upgrade from, I had an ANET A8. I was looking for something a bit, better that would allow me to expand and, have a bigger printer. That's what everyone, as their first thing is that I want the biggest printer possible. But, so I was looking around, I saw the Voron V2, and I was scared by all the AliExpress sourcing, and I was selling the printer I had to a friend, so I was like, how am I going to print everything? And essentially what ended up happening is I ended up buying a different printer, and I always kept an eye on what was happening with V2.1 and V2.2. And one of the things I really wanted to do was, okay, I have this printer that I like, but it has a lot of flaws, and I always wanted a Core XY printer. So I was like, how can I create a mashup between what ended up being a mashup between a V1.6 and a V2.1? And some of you are aware of that. Some people call it the Franken Voron. But when I joined the team here on Voron, one of the first things I started working on was, okay, how can we incorporate the learnings from V2.2, the updated gantry parts, all those things that were great with the V2.1 designs, so replacing all the V2.1 parts with V2.2. Well, then around that same time, that was maybe a little before Christmas, RCF came up with the idea, okay, we want to do a clean slate design. We want to kind of get back to the roots, look at the number of parts we have, the bill of materials, really work on, if there's any extra added complexity that we have, let's try to reduce the number of unique screw counts we have. It doesn't make sense to have an M3 by 8, 10, 12, 16, let's try to consolidate. And so, around December, I was like, oh, maybe I'll release V1.7 with the 2.2, parts, and then I was going to release the next revision, maybe in the summer or something like that. And I quickly learned how extensively long all the documentation work and all the part modifications that would need to be done. So I essentially scrapped the idea of a V2.2 gantry on a V1.6 and kind of went all in on what ended up being the V2.4 gantry. So what I have back here behind the black box, I guess it's about time to remove this. This is actually a V1.8, and the reason we're doing that is really because V1.7 was, even though it was never released, it was kind of focused on the V2.2 gantry, and since a lot of things have changed since then, we ended up iterating the design to V1.8. So as you can see, it's kind of hard to see. Let me actually maybe switch to my phone if it's possible. Let me try this just 1 second. Okay. So, yep. Is this good? I think so.
Yeah, you're good.
Awesome.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, nice and clear.
Perfect.
Great. Let me go full screen. Okay. So yeah, so here's V1.8. You can see I have used the afterburner from V2.4, the open beta we've had for a while. There are some slight modifications that needed to be made. Unlike V2.4, which has the Z end stop behind the bed, with V1.8, we actually had to move the end stop, to the right side of the bed. So I needed some extra axis travel. I've slimmed down the afterburner slightly, and that got implemented into the V2.4 release as well. I don't want it to steal too much of RCF's thunder, but you've seen the teasers from V2.4. We have the direct drive AB modules, and a simplified gantry. And I'll let him talk about that some more. But the one thing you'll notice down here, where V1.6 was, about the same height off the table as V2.4, or maybe I'll go this way. The V1.8 height here is actually slimmed down a good amount. You'll see, normally this display, it's another maybe 20 or 30 millimeters higher. And the reason I was able to do that was, if you look in the back here, let's see here. I should have taken off these side panels. If you look back there, you'll see that there's actually a back electronics compartment. I'll show you more of that in CAD in a bit. But what that ends up doing is we can remove a lot of the low voltage components that currently exist below the printer, and we can actually move those to the back. And then in addition, all the high voltage stuff gets stuck underneath the printer. So you do have some isolation there between the high voltage side and the low voltage side, which I feel like is a nice touch, just an added measure of safety there. And it also makes wiring a lot easier, because all the stuff that you typically access is right there in the back of the printer. So if you rotate it around, it's easy to access. The other thing, we'll show you more in a second here in CAD. I'll touch on that in a minute. But you'll notice this Z assembly here is actually very similar to the V1.6. There's not a lot of changes there. The only thing that really changed are these parts right here. They just got a little bit larger because I realized that, of course, right here I have these fantastic ABS panels from Nemgra, and those are great. But if you're hand cutting those panels out of Coroplast, a lot of times you'll be a few millimeters off, and then this part does not overlap those at all in the current design from V1.6, and so you'd see those poor cuts, whenever you open the printer, and it kind of bothered me. So from some suggestions from some people on Discord, we added a little bit of space there, just so all those cuts could get kind of covered up a little bit. But other than that, this Z assembly is essentially just still the V1.6. We have the integrated steppers with the lead screw. So those are kind of a sticking point a little bit, because it's hard to source those in some cases. You always want to make sure you get ones that are straight. There's no issues with it being bent. But we started looking at some sources that are a little cheaper than the OMC one, so that we're trying to again reduce cost on this, and create a simpler, more user-friendly alternative to the V2.4. The other thing here, remember, with this design with V1.6, we don't have 3-point bed leveling right now, but these two Z motors are independent. So with the same probe that V2.4 has and V1.6 has, this will level from left to right. And then there will be a thumb screw right here that will allow you to level in this direction, which is the only remaining degree of freedom there. So that's really nice. You'll notice also, this is probably one of the most obvious things, but this is a fully enclosed printer design. So where V1.6 had essentially the umbilical cord coming up and over, this setup is fully enclosed in all sides, and I have been running it with this setup for quite some time. I had to tune this gap pretty extensively and iterate on it. That's why you'll see some of my extrusions and printers around here have some different holes, and slots here because I had to tweak those dimensions a little bit. You'll also see this cable chain design here. I ran an umbilical cord for V1 the V1.6 mod, what I used to call it, for quite some time. And while it does work okay, occasionally, depending on, you'll see how this is kind of curled around there. As long as it's just a Bowden tube, it stays out of the way, and it's no problem. But especially with larger printer sizes, it can fall kind of in the way of the print head and sometimes get caught, which may cause like a skip essentially on the motor. And so that's one of the reasons we went back to cable chains. You'll see this here. This cable chain is mounted directly to the XY joint and loops up around nicely. And then you'll see in the very back over there that those wires actually go through a portion of the AV drive that has a hole in it and go directly down into the electronics enclosure in the back. So let's see, what else? Let me go ahead and switch back over to my computer. So just one second.
Okay, so yes, we're back. So, and the one thing that I've been reminded that I did not bring up is that you'll notice this is this gantry is based on MGN9 rails, unlike the V1.6 that had the linear rods for X and Y. And where V1.6 had issues with those rods sagging if you expanded beyond the stock 230 millimeters. This printer with the same essentially gantry design as V2.4 does not have that same issue. So as of right now, the same frame size that the same X and Y frame size for V2.4 is the same X and Y frame size for a V1.8. And where in the past you were able to fit a 230 millimeter bed, if you do an upgrade from 1.6 to 1.8, you'll be able to fit a 250 millimeter by 250 millimeter bed size in that area. I've done testing above 250 millimeters, and I think a 300 by 300 spec is, that is entirely reasonable. You'll notice maybe last week there was a serial request by Blam. He has kind of the older style version of this printer, the F1.6 mod, and that design is a 300 by 300, and there's no issues there. Scaling above that size, though, you will start to see some issues. Not as much with the gantry. Theoretically, you could still go up to 350 by 350, due to the same gantry, as V2.4, which goes up to that size. But you'll start seeing some issues with the bed at that point. Because in this current design, you only have 2 lead screws, and that kind of instability, tilting front and back, can start to cause some issues. So let's see here. Let me switch over to see if this works. One moment. I'm going to attempt to bring up CAD here. Okay, let's see here. And I will also close YouTube. Okay. Just a second. Okay. You need to relaunch Discord. Just get screen share working again. Let's see here. So we can address that maybe a bit later. Was there any questions in the YouTube or Voron Q&A at this time?
Let me see. I'm sorry. I've got like 37 different windows open and trying to find. Is someone else also looking at the?
Yeah. I'm looking at the Q&A and the YouTube chat. Did you mention 1.7 to 1.8? Why would that distinction was made?
Yes. So that one again, per our discussions, originally 1.7 was essentially going to be the v2.2 gantry, and since we went to the v2.4, v1.7 was essentially an internal, development release. But once v2.4 came along, we just skipped that gantry size. So
okay, I've also got a question here from Venny about the upgrade path from 1.6. So what parts would we need to purchase, remove, add, like that?
And so v1.6 to v1.8 is a little bit complicated, and the main reason from that is the vertical extrusions are longer. And so I do have a CAD setup for a v1.6 to v1.8 that does not have the updated frame, so you don't get the enclosure around the outside, but you do get the updated v2.4 gantry with linear rails, and you could essentially in that instance go up to a 250 millimeter bed size if you wanted to do that.
Okay. Another question here, Austin. Would the bed from a 250 V2 be swappable into 1.8? So are we using the standard kind of bed mounting that we are on the V2?
So V2, so with V1.8, you essentially the size of the bed is the same. You'll still use the same, I believe, 5/16 thick bed. The mounting locations will be different. In a V1.6 scenario, those bed extrusions go left and right instead of front to back. So you will need some updated, you'll have to drill some new holes for that, essentially. But other than that, you should be able to translate that fairly well. And also, again, where V2.4 could be essentially a hard mount to those extrusions because the gantry moves, in this case, you will need that degree of freedom in order to adjust the tilt. So there is one point that will have adjustability there. So.
And
yeah, Austin, like you're saying, you could just drill extra holes and cover it in PEI or a spring steel sheet, and you'll be fine. Correct. Yep. So at least with all the Voron beds I've used, all the holes are on the periphery. So yeah, if you can cover them with PEI and put a 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter hole to get a wrench through if you need to, or spring steel bed with magnet sheet, which I am having a love-hate relationship with right now. So. Any other questions? They're looking at RoboDave. We're tossing some screenshots of 1.8 up. We're working on that. We're trying to figure out if we can do a screen share for that.
And I may have to jump out and jump back in. It looks like Discord needs me to
do an update or something.
To restart, essentially. The one thing I would like to mention about this kind of development path, we did take a hard look at cost, and that's really one of the driving factors that I kind of kept in mind when choosing components for this and deciding, okay, do we add $100 or $200 worth of product cost in this? And the reality is the V1.6, with Misumi rods and all of that, ended up being a lot more expensive than we thought it was. Essentially, I did a bill of materials comparison between all of the V1.6, V2.2 printers. And started looking at, okay, where are we from a cost standpoint? And I think from a V1.6 standpoint, we're higher than we wanted to. A lot of the dev team has been around for the last few years, and maybe 5 years ago or 4 years ago, you bought a different types of parts than you do now. And in order to create kind of that differentiation between V1.8 and V2.4 is, you really do have to keep an eye on simplicity, which, for the first time builder, V2.4 or any of the V2 series, per se, are more complex to build. You do have the additional factor of all of your Z drives and, tuning that and making sure everything's assembled correctly. V1.8 is designed to really be a system that is a lot easier and approachable for, the first time builder to get. So that's a big deal, and that's one of the reasons why we haven't kind of gone to higher end components for V1.7, because we're really trying to get that. Ideally, I haven't done the math, but if we could get it into the 750 to 1,000 range, that would be fantastic, because I think that's kind of the price point that you end up with a lot of the similar, Core XY 250, 300-ish cubed build volumes, that's where most of not that we have competition, but most of the competing printers are. Spec electronics for V1.8. So with this, you don't need as many drivers as V2. So you can reuse SKR 1.3 if you have that. I've been using the 2209 drivers just like we spec with V2, because those are there's not really many reasons to not pick those at this point. Hot ends, you can use whatever hot end that a toolhead is designed for with Afterburner. So, Dragon, V6, no Volcano, but all the Mosquito Magnum, etc. And if there's a new hot end that comes out, I'm pretty sure one of us will end up designing a toolhead to support it. So there's plenty of options there. And as far as how much testing has been done, I've been running various versions of, this general setup for the last, let's see, trying to think. I think it was last year, maybe in January, that I built the first kind of revision of this. And that was with, the V2.1 gantry, which is a little less strong. And so, these parts are just essentially beefier on top of that. And I won't talk too much more, because I know RCF has some more things to talk about V2.4, but a lot of the same things he brings up with the V2.4 gantry are the same things that apply to V1.8. So the simplification, etc.
So Eddie, try restarting Discord really quick.
Okay.
And
Sure.
see if you can just kind of show off things in CAD a little more.
Perfect. Yep. One moment.
So while he does that, also bonus points 10 for the stickers.
Okay. I will try sharing. Let's see here. Let me just make sure my screen is ready. Okay. Just 1 second here.
I don't want to wait. I want it now. Now, Eddie, now.
Isn't that kind of odd coming from us to say we want things now?
Okay, so can you guys see my CAD?
Sorry about that. I had to. Is he full screen?
Yep.
Is it showing CAD? Just making sure.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So here is the V1.8 CAD assembly as it is today. So you'll notice, essentially the same general parts as you saw before. The V2.4 gantry. You'll notice though that where V2 has the linear rails for for the Y axis on the bottom. In this case, and I'll hide these panels for a second, just one moment. If I can do this. Okay. So essentially, as you'll see, these rails are on the top, and that is a pain, because that means essentially for every redesign that RCF does, which is fantastic, and I love the work he does. But anytime he iterates any of these parts, I have to essentially rebuild them for V1.8, which I've spent way too much time doing those things. But it's good. It's improvement. So the reason why you have to do that is because, which honestly I think this is one of the coolest features about V1.6, is these, and the mouse scrolling is inverted. But yes, these rails are the rods for Z are actually directly against the bottom and top extrusions, which is fantastic, because if you get these cut at a reputable place, or even as I did, essentially taping them all together and cutting them all at the same time, so they end up at the exact same length. That really helps you, from a position standpoint, to get those in the right location. And that's a big deal, because essentially these extrusions here are blind joints, on either side, the front and back, which is great. But I want to remind everyone, for V2, you have quad gantry leveling. For V1.6, even if you had 3 lead screws to establish this plane has to be parallel to the plane of these rails. And that means that if this extrusion is slightly tilted down here and up there, this rail is not going to be on the same plane as this or this rail over here. and that is a big deal, because you want to make sure that these are fine-tuned down to, you know, as close to parallel as possible, and then the plate is parallel to that plane. So I'm going to write up some guides on Dozuki on how to do that, to help guide you through those steps, because that is really key. You know, otherwise, if you do not do that, you're going to have to run bed mesh leveling on this, which you really shouldn't have to. So that step is really key. So these XY joints are different. The front idlers are very similar to V2.4, which you know, RCF is going to talk about very soon. And these AB joints are also very similar, but again, they're different enough that I have to, you know, do a decent amount of modifications to them, because, you know, with V2.4, these, you know, these extrusions ride on those Z linear rails, and so they're going to be slightly different. The one thing, I know I'm running long here, so I'm going to start wrapping it up. But the one thing I would want to focus on again is DIN rails. So, you know, this is something we've been working on and looking into, because it does allow you a lot of flexibility on where you mount your electronics. So you'll see here what I did is you'll notice I don't have the power inlet on this model, but it will essentially be positioned here, which is similar to where the V1.6 power inlet was. But you have all of your high voltage connections right in this location, which, you know, if you want to do a you know, terminal block or something like that to help, that's great. But the only opening right here is this.
So Eddie, they can't see your cursor on the stream, so you just have to
okay.
explain.
So I'll have to talk to it. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So there's this opening. You'll see to the right of the power supply here, and that is the only opening between your low voltage compartment and your high voltage. There's one more over here, but essentially you can route your 24 volt and 5 volt, you know, up to a mount. You know, there's tons of mounts available on Thingiverse and GrabCAD, etc., that you can use for DIN mounting with relays, with, you know, buck converters, anything you want. There's a DIN mount for it. So you can route your basic DC voltage, 24 volt, 12 volt, 5 volt, whatever you need, and then from a point here, you can spread that out to wherever you want. So that really adds a lot of flexibility, and actually, you have so much space here that there's a lot of opportunities, you know, if you want to add extra features in the future. So I thought that was really cool.
So you're saying that there's so much room for activities?
Yes. And I don't know what those are yet, but I'm sure that all of our community who has great ideas on mods and improvements will have plenty of great ideas. So there's tons of room. If you want to put a GTR board in here with the M5 expansion, which I have here on my desk, which is not useful at all in this case because you don't need that many steppers, go at it. There's plenty of room there for you. So that's fantastic.
So you'd say if you put the GTR in there, you could run two 1.8s, basically.
If you wanted to do that, you could, yes. And then the one last thing, let's see here. The corner brackets here are actually a printed part, and yes, I'm missing a screw. Don't judge me too hard. But this is a printed part, which I think is really cool because all of these panels, you cut to a rectangular cross section, or maybe there's a single slot in them. But these panels are all interlocking with this piece. So essentially, either like this panel is constrained by all the slots in these extrusions, or this panel is constrained by a slot here, and so it all kind of fits together really nicely. And with those laser cut panels, they're fantastic. But I've been running the Coroplast cut panels for a long time, and those work great too. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. There's not that much more with V1.8, but the one thing I would like to point out is right now these are the V2.2 front panel mounts. There may be a better solution in the future, and I know you guys like to mod stuff. So if anyone of you want to come up with a more creative solution or something else, hinge doors, whatever, magnets, go at it and figure it out. So I think that's about it. Is there any questions about CAD that I can answer before I drop off?
Let's see.
Not seeing any on YouTube.
You need to wait a few seconds because there's a good
Sure.
10-second lag.
Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
you're right. Yeah, I forgot about that.
You will note this display here is not the old style of the 12864. This is the FYS ETC Mini 12864. I do really like that display. It looks a lot more professional in my opinion, and you have a cool option of backlighting this knob here as well. And I will post if someone wants to post the image that I took this morning. It's pretty cool. I took some photos of the V1.8 this morning. So more to come on this, but thank you all.
So Eddie, folks are
Yes.
wanting to know, perhaps obviously, when the STLs and CAD are going to be released.
Right. That is a great question. So as soon as possible. My idea right now is there is some updates that RCF has done to V2.4 fairly recently that I need to update some CAD for V1.8. However, the bill of materials is essentially locked in. There may be an extra screw here or a screw deleted there. However, you shouldn't be ordering the exact count of bill of material screws. So as long as you get 10,
Always
20,
extras.
50, 100 pieces
Yeah.
extra of these fasteners, you should be fine. So my goal is, by the end of Sunday, essentially, I already have kind of a rough schedule, but to have essentially all of the unique parts that you may need that are not like standard Voron, screws, etc. So that you can go ahead and get those AliExpress orders going because we know it's going to take a while. And then as the STLs are done, those will get pushed so you can get printing. And then, soon after that, by the time you're done printing and all your AliExpress packages are in, we'll have the manual pushed out for you to use. So that is kind of the overview of the schedule I have for V1.8.
Perfect. Yeah, the plan has always been this was going to appear at Murph, and so basically this is our release party for what was going to be Murph, but we're doing it via Voron Live now because of Bat Soup, and so this is just our way of kind of celebrating the work that Eddie and RCF and everyone else have put in so far with all of this.
Yep. One thing I would like to point out for all the people that are, I don't necessarily agree with the umbilical cord design, but you will notice that there is an end stop on the AB module here, and then there is also I forget that my mouse doesn't show up. But on the afterburner, there's a slot right there. I guess that section's hidden, but essentially there's also an X end stop on the X carriage. So in this case, all of your end stop wiring does not go, or you don't have any end stops on your XY joint. They're all either directly on afterburner or else on the gantry somewhere else. So that may be useful in the future for you guys, but that might give you some ideas if you want to go ahead and mod that for whatever your interests are. So, but yep.
Hey, Eddie, quick question. Are you using like a 4K display?
I am using a remote desktop into my desktop. Is it
Because
going
we can
funky?
see. No, we can see your mouse, but your mouse is just absolutely ridiculously tiny. So I think that might be part of what's going on. It's just
there's
that
a
you
little
were if you were remoted in or something. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yep. So awesome. Well, I'm gonna cancel the screen share unless there's any other questions, and then we'll go on with the regularly scheduled program.
Well,
if I can speak.
So Eddie, I've got one or two more questions
Sure.
that have come in.
Yep. Go for it.
So one person made the comment or had the question about there's not an exhaust fan in the 1.8 design, and
Yes. So I've been running essentially the V2.1 exhaust fan. I personally haven't installed the filter or the fan, so yes, you can definitely 100% drop in the existing exhaust fan from V2.4 or V2.1 or 2.2 or whatever. It fits, it'll work great. So the only reason it wasn't included here is because I hadn't used it, but if we get enough, feedback from the community that they want that, then, you can just drop it in essentially. So, yep.
Cool. So
I'm just going through my parts bin next to me. I don't know if you guys haven't seen the Mini 12864. I've got mine just sitting here. Basically, it's just a display, rotary encoder, switch, reset button. But it does. At least this version has two onboard RGB LEDs here, as well as the backlight is RGB, so you can kind of tweak around with it. Connects with just standard two IDC cables. So
it is really slick, and you can update those RGB. They're actually NeoPixels,
Yeah,
so if you want to change colors as your when your print change colors or something like that, you can entirely do that. And
I had mine set up to when the print started, it would go blue. When the bed got hot, it was red, and then when print started, it would go green. So at a quick glance, I could just see what the status of the print was. So yeah, and for the size of it, it's absolutely wonderful. So yeah,
good deal. Okay.
That in addition to other boards, I mean the only issue I've seen is some boards don't have the two IDC cables, but I think we have a solution for that. So
yep. And the one thing to note is since the main board is in the back of the unit, and the display is on the very front, you will need some slightly longer cables to reach your display. So that's just something to be aware of. If you have I had the correct length in my parts bin and was able to just grab those, but you will, you might need to order those from AliExpress or Amazon or something like that. And
honestly,
I'll have the length of those essentially. So
honestly, if you're comfortable with it, it's actually cheaper to just get the IDC connectors themselves and a roll of cable. I've got a roll of cable because then you can get it to the exact length you need. But it's also, I mean, I use them for all kinds of projects. I've used them for programming adapters, stuff like that. But I mean, if you want to buy the cables, buy the cables. But if you're comfortable making stuff, adapters, and you basically just pinch the cable in.
For sure.
And once you do that, it's a pretty simple process to get the exact right length cables you need. So,
yep.
So one thing about our community is you've probably guessed if you've hung around any point in time is we've got a really eclectic bunch of folks that are designers and contributors that are all kind of jumping in on various projects. I mean, if you've looked at it, you've probably seen the Hall Effect in-stop boards where we as a community had designed our own in-stops that used magnets because, I mean, why not have a completely and totally touch-free system for homing things as opposed to yet another micro switch or something like that. And apparently you guys are still having trouble hearing me, so give me a second.
He's nice and loud on my end, but I don't know if that's just his.
So is this better? And so yeah, YouTube folks are hearing one set of stream and Discord's hearing another set, so it may be that there's some offset there. But I just dialed in 4 decibels again on OBS, so if that doesn't work, let me know and I'll go from there. But
I mean, people seem like they're saying they're hearing you better now, but some people are
saying yes, some people
much better, some people are saying not better. So I think we're going to have to go with it.
Yep, we're going to go with it. But so the Hall Effect in-stop board is not the only thing that we've done as an electronics project. This is something that we've been sitting on for a while, and it's never going to be released in its current form because technology has passed us by. But if you've ever been looking at the emojis on the Discord server, and you might have seen something called the Taco Raven, there is a reason for that. My friends, I present to you...
What if you go full screen, show it off?
The Taco Raven. And what do I mean by that? I mean this board right here that you're looking at. This was designed and manufactured by the Voron Designs community, expressly for the purpose of running a 2 series Voron.
Hey, Doc. Oh, there you go.
Yep, right. It just went full screen for me too.
Yep. Yeah, there's a bit of lag on YouTube versus Discord. So this right here came about with the question, so how hard could it be to design our own board? And we did it. 8 drivers. This one, part of the reason I say that technology has passed us by, this was done with 2130 TMCs that had we known that 2209s were coming out 6 months later, we would have waited and used those because 2209s are magic. But 8 drivers, 32-bit SAMD, yeah, it's a
21 or 51.
Thank you.
51.
Yeah, separate channels for you can use for your voltage in, your bed, and actually there's a separate motor specific voltage channel. So if you wanted to have multiple current sets and drive your motors at one current and everything else on the board on another, you could do it. So this is a project that we did a run of I think 20 of them internally that we've tested. To Maglin's point, this predates the SKRs and everything else. This is a background project. At some point in time, we're probably going to release the source for this so that if anyone else is feeling particularly clever and wants to experiment, maybe, hey, I'm going to take this and make it for 2209s or 5160s. Or
it's not cheaper than the SKR.
No. But for a single board solution, it's
Right.
available.
Yep. And so this is
And it won't catch your house on fire.
Yes.
That we've tested.
Yeah. But so once again, this is just kind of showing a little bit of a view behind the curtain as far as other things we've worked on, because at a certain point, we've got so many clever people around that these ideas kind of percolate out and we start doing these things. Oh, and the Taco Raven, if you can see the watermark and it will focus.
I know Fulg had the original sketch up. If you want to switch over to him at some point, we can show that off. But yeah.
So this is just, as I said, it's cool. It's fun. We enjoyed it. And yep. Here, 1 second. This is the shipping container that arrived to Fulg with the Taco Raven in it. I was the one who actually coordinated all the shipping and everything, so I had fun with it. And yeah.
Yep, there we go. And it was just one of these, we wanted to come up with a code name for it, and we're just like, we just need like 2 random words, and somebody came up with, Voron was Raven, and I don't even know where Taco came from, but it was like burrito, and then all of a sudden Taco Raven just stuck. I log in one day, and I see a channel named Taco Raven. What the hell is this? I just scrolled through like 8 hours of lurk, found it out, but yeah.
So yeah, and once again, we're gonna release the source for it sometime. I can't speak to when. I'm not the original board designer on it, but if you see this and you want the source, and as I said, if you want to take a dive at it and try and make it work for 2209s or whatever, have at it. So yeah, that was
yeah.
Oh, and by the way, for those of you who are asking about it. It was designed by the same guy who designed the Hall Effect in-stop board, and he designs controller boards and everything else for a living.
So he knows what he's doing when he's doing this.
Yep. So
he's the one that I've talked to when I'm doing some PCB design, because I don't trust myself, and when he signs off on something that I'm working on, I feel comfortable about it. So
same.
The question about any chance to port RepRap firmware to it. Does not hear network has it. So I'm assuming the question is, it doesn't have networking on it, or does it have networking on it? And the answer is no. This was designed purely as a clipper-driven board. So there is going to be a Raspberry Pi hooked to this, driving that and acting as your network interface and things like that. Could you put RepRap firmware on this? I have no idea. I mean,
you probably could. Yeah.
You might. And,
if you have the skill set to do it, then go for it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how a lot of our projects started off with. It's just, can we do this? There wasn't a single board computer, a single board that was out there that did it. So one of the dev guys said, I'm going to try to make it. And that was maybe
almost 2 years ago.
Yeah. So that's why it's kind of over. It's not as wow nowadays, but it's still a very powerful board that could still run everything that we needed to do. It's just Then the SKRs were released. Then the 2208s, 2209s, 2156s, 2156. I don't remember, and it still works. But it's kind of a proof of concept that we can do this, and now we can kind of finalize it again. So
Yeah.
I'll just chime in. You could port rep firmware as I work in the code. It's doable. I won't be doing it. If you like
So
CPP
doable, but
and
not fun.
Eclipse, it's doable.
It's
But-
mission impossible to compile rep for a dual
Exactly.
let alone a different board. So the tool chain's not fun to work with. Anyway, that's a side note for why rep might be a little harder to put on there.
Yeah. If you're not DC42, don't plan on getting it to compile.
So have we heard from RCF?
Yeah, he's. I told him we would be waiting for him here shortly, so he should be here soon.
Do we want to talk about maybe SKRs as the default boards moving
Yeah.
forward?
Yeah.
Eddie, maybe because you did the guide on the
Sure.
1.3.
Yep. So the SKR 1.3s are really, there's a level of cost, let me just go back a little bit. So from a development standpoint, we're always, wanting to make sure that parts we select have multiple sources, that they're easy for people to get. And so that was, I think, one of the first things that really, prevented us from going to the SKR 1.3 early. There's also a cost associated with it, not as much for the main board itself, but for the TMC 2209 drivers. A4988s are, so cheap, and, they're almost pennies, 10 cents, 20 cents, 50 cents.
They were hard to source at the beginning.
Yep. And so, yeah, because there was so much demand right after the 2209s came out that they were out of stock for a long time. But 2209s are so much nicer than 4988s. And, the SKR 1.3 is a really nicely designed board that has the 24-volt, capability right out of the box. You don't have to cut any diodes or anything like that. And all of the UART wiring to communicate with the TMC drivers are built, it's built in directly to the board. I remember when I used the TMC 2130s for the first time with essentially a ramps board and had to, connect all the terminals to try to get it to work. And that was like an ordeal in itself, and trying to figure out the pins and where everything went and getting everything addressed correctly. But the SKR 1.3, all of those kind of, user roadblocks for first-time users really went away. To the point where you can download a config file that we have, on Voron users, and pretty much, obviously you're still going to have to set up your printer, but it's a lot easier to use. Again, we're also going to 24 volts moving forward. I know a lot of people are already doing that, but the key there is for the 2209 drivers. We did see a few instances where there's so many variables with V2.2 and V2.4Z drives, but the key there is, you may be slightly skipping steps and not know it.
Hello.
And hey, how's it going?
Fearless leader. He has arrived.
He has arrived. He's top dead center too.
I'm sorry, guys.
That's
No,
all
you're
good.
not.
We're doing good.
Well, there were two answers to the same thing there.
Well, we'll see how your presentation goes. We'll decide if we want to forgive you later.
That's right.
You missed Eddie's, so you're gonna have
Hovering-
to watch it again.
I don't know if I missed it. I've been in that chat room for a long time now.
Okay.
But yes, I'm gonna have to. Are we recording this?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, cool. Yeah, I do. Jokes aside, and no offense, I do want to see it actually. This is my first cup of coffee.
Well,
Already? Jeez.
You want us to ramble on for a little bit more while you get woken up? Or you
I'm pretty much ready to go. I do love the paper cutouts of who is who.
Andre was screwing with me because I wrote it backwards, because then on my screen it shows properly, but then on stream it's backwards again. So I had to read. So you
I
just sit
said
there.
it was backward. Tim.
But it was right. It was the right way, and then I put it. Then I mirrored it, and it was. But
Who are you?
yeah, Eddie, you gotta redo that, or whoever that was in the Voron Live Q&A who posted that. Who's who and where's everybody? Army, if you're listening, you gotta re-up that. You gotta put the RCF in there again.
Is this backwards?
Nope, that's good. Yeah, if you write it the right way, you're fine. So just tape it to your forehead. Or just write it on your forehead. And I got
No,
Andre just says IV cam.
That's backwards, Doc. Sorry, man.
Doc, all I see is pixels.
Yeah.
Huh. All right.
It's okay. Doc needs to up his bandwidth.
I think we're killing his bandwidth because all of our videos go into his PC, which is then pushing it out to YouTube. So he's doubling everything basically.
Oh no!
On YouTube, Doc stream is actually great. The best.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it looks really good.
Well, because he's probably just pulling a live video there.
Yep. So
I can't believe we didn't print name tag. How do we not have printed name tags yet?
We'll have to get Andy on that. He'll do some design, get like a Voron name tag.
That sounds great with magnets. Fog, I love you too.
Just reuse all the other parts. We'll just 3D print it. We'll be fine.
yeah. So
He didn't
RCF,
hear me.
you ready?
Let's do this.
All right.
Let's do this.
Do we have to?
What have we not talked about when it comes to Afterburn?
Anything.
Everything.
In scope of.
Yep.
The
Go
only
for it.
thing Eddie mentioned was that he slimmed it down a little bit to hit the end stop, and that's been carried forward to the 2.4.
Yeah, that was the unification. So I was up last night trying to wire this printer out, and it didn't happen. So the printer does not have currently wiring right now because I ripped my wiring out 2 days ago. But everything else is there. So I can show some stuff.
Let's do it.
Let me switch over to my phone so I can do a walk. My phone.
You fancy.
The base group is nice.
I just dropped the who's who in YouTube chat, and I think somebody put it in the Voron Live QA as well. So
Cool.
yeah,
Thank you.
there's a couple.
Okay.
There's a picture of it with the overlay names, which is perfect. So I'm gonna actually pin it there. So if anybody needs to look at it, keep our faces there blocked for posterity. Oh, no, we're good.
We were good.
And then we just get the better looking face. I don't know how I'm still here with you guys. All I do is make jokes and like. Actually, well, I mean, I don't know if RCF's still setting up. Something I mentioned before with the displays, I threw together a quick PCB here. Takes 2 IDC connectors and pin headers, and basically adapts it right down to an Arduino Nano, which Clipper supports. So you can flash this Nano with Clipper, plug it right in, plug it into a display, and then you've got a standalone adapter for a display, which is kind of useful for any printer you have that doesn't have the IDC connectors or you need to use them for something else. So
Go
He's
ahead,
back.
Max.
I figured it out. I found the little flippy symbol.
nice T-shirt.
Thank you. Available on merchandising. All right.
Bingo. He mentioned merchandising.
Merchandising. All right. So this is 2.4 as it is stands currently. Where should I start? Well, first off, the doors. We have magnetic doors. Open them up. It's loading the panels remaining on this printer because I want to show them off. Print in place hinges. So it's basically one screw. And they're actually pretty smooth for something that prints in place. And then, you know, they're magnetic. and you still have the little strip here that lets you seal the doors up. And basically all I did is I took my front panel and cut it in half using a scoring knife, and it was okay. Somebody had a concern about taking VHB off. Please remember the VHB, just like the 3M, any other 3M products, is dissolvable with isopropyl alcohol. So a little plastic scraper or credit card and some ISO, and you're good to go. Let's see. And I believe these were originally community mods. Unfortunately, hopefully somebody can. Cat, what do you need? Hopefully somebody can chime in and tell me who the original creator of these types of closures were. Next up is the LCD that swings up and sits flush. This is the mini 12864 LCD, originally contributed by Icabos. And then the mount, the flush mount idea came from the community as well. I don't remember the name of the person who did. He did like a flush mount with like an oval cutout, and that's kind of where the inspiration came from. Anyway, I just want to make sure that. Don't worry, we will find proper credit, and proper credit will be given to when 2.4 is actually released. Or hopefully somebody will mention it on the stream, or they'll pop up and go, "That was me." Hopefully. So the new drives they look beefy, but they're about half of what plastic-wise, what we had before. We had, I believe the HDZ for 2.2 was half a spool. These are back to being a quarter of a spool, kind of similar to 2.1. This, I can't get it. Screw. We have these. Oh, I probably should loosen these. But these swing out basically and let the motor come in closer. And then when you close this latch here, it tensions the Z-belt. And I guess I'm missing the killer feature. These now support vanilla off the metal ADT gears from Pouch, which is kind of important.
Any of these?
Well, actually, it supports any gears, but you can actually now purchase the 5-pack from Pouch and use them. Yes, those beefy monsters. Yeah.
Yep.
They have M5 set screws.
They're big.
Well, not those. The ones I got have M5 set screws.
Yeah, these are 3.
Okay.
Maybe 4.
4. I think they're 4. Anyway, the reason we're moving to metal ADTs is, first of all, it's been requested by many people at this point. And second of all, we've had a lot of problems when you have a precision drive, we're talking microns, with printed gears that can deform under stress, basically. It's just, or your printer is not dialed in perfectly, and you are in fact printing eggs. When it comes to, I mean, on the scale of like machinists, we may as well just be printing eggs because none of it is round. So if you want hyper precision, I really recommend these. These are amazing. They do have a little bit more inertial mass, but it works. And again,
Bling.
They're a lot less parts to print, basically. The drives themselves, the housing themselves, and the motor mount are separate. And I'm using instead of basically encasing all of this in plastic, I'm using the 2020 as a rigid member of this assembly to make sure that it doesn't move around. On to the afterburner. As Eddie mentioned, this was slimmed down from the beta version. There was a community bug filed that this wasn't beefy enough, so I beefed it up. And then the idler didn't swing out enough to actually see what's inside there.
So we kind of fixed that part. So you can actually swing it out and look inside your thing and make sure that, if you're clearing a jam, basically, you don't have to disassemble this whole thing. And speaking of the assembly, so this front fan part that used to be kind of integrated into all of this is now a separate assembly. It's basically held on with these two screws. When you take them out, I'm not going to take it out right now, but when you take these two screws out, this whole assembly of the fan and this fan comes off. So you can actually put them together separately, and you don't have to fiddle with, making sure that 35 millimeter screws go in here. So then these screws can go in here and all of this kind of hanging around. And the main driver for that is because there's now a Bowden module for this. Let me grab it from my box of parts. So this basically replaces the extruder module here, and gives you a way to thread in a Bowden coupling, and basically this is significantly lighter, obviously, than the M3 motor, the NEMA 17 that's sitting there, but it allows you to run the afterburner toolhead system, which is basically the 2.4 toolhead system, without running DD if you don't want to. I know some people still have an aversion to it because of speed trade-offs. And yes, you do have some speed trade-offs with direct drive, but I don't know. I want all of my machines direct drive at this point, or direct feed. Direct drive is later. Speaking of direct drive, the AB motors are now direct drive.
No more 110 loops.
Yes. Yes.
What am I gonna do with the 40 that I have on hand, though?
Oh, shut your mouth!
Dev life.
We need like a squeaking, sound effect.
Oh, like they put the fake motor sounds in cars.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we have. I mean, they're so much more simple. This printer actually has DNA-wise. This printer has more in common with version 2.0 than any other printers, because we really went. Tin fought me on every fucking screw. Like, it was like, I really need an M3 by 12 here. Like, do you really need that? Do you? Or
No.
can you design around it?
Well, did you?
I did design around it. I didn't need it after all. It's all true.
True.
This crossbar is now 40 millimeters longer. This is the only change to the non-printed parts that we have on this printer, because, well, let's be honest. If I release the version that's longer, all I'm doing is basically putting 40 millimeters, 20 millimeters of extra plastic here for zero reason. It just basically lessens rigidity. Because we don't have a motor sitting right here, I could move this up this way and increase the amount of aluminum that's in the gantry versus the amount of plastic. They're not that expensive, honestly. And this is not a mechanical, it's literally just a brace for these two belts. So you're not destroying your Z bearings. So
Yeah, because otherwise you just have the AB modules would try to sag down as you tightened it up. So
yeah, you basically would be taking this MG cart and pulling it this way and continuously destroying your bearings. And not only pulling, but also cantilevering out a little bit, because then all that would be holding this angle is these screws right here. And that's not enough.
And I think we discussed this a little bit earlier this morning, but if you want, you can run the old AB modules with the new idlers and XY joints and stuff, and the belt path isn't different in the back there. So it's not like you're stuck until you can get that piece of extrusion in.
This is true, yes. As far as this and then exit out, it's the same.
Someone else is asking if you can use the old Z drives with the new
Yes,
gantry.
yes,
Other way around?
absolutely, yes, 100% yes.
Cool.
The idea was people could migrate piecemeal.
Yeah, the only parts that are tied together, I think, are the ones you're going to move to next year. Is the joints, the XY joints, and the idlers in the front.
Yep, correct. So I redid the Z blocks, and if you see, there's now like gaps. So we actually have full 100, 260, or whatever your size of printer is, travel on the Y, which means you have room to put the Z switch. You have room to basically use all of your bed plus have extra travel to get to a nozzle brush or a Z switch without sacrificing build plate. And we lost that with 2.2, I believe. Or you know what?
By the way,
This thing is heavy.
just to give some credit, it was Schlank who had the idea with the display embedded in the skirts.
Cool. And Schlunk
I'm-
also has that. Schlunk is also responsible for the beefy AB ledge.
Yeah, and
Schlunk,
I'm
which means hose in Russian. Thank you, hose. I think he's Russian. I'm pretty sure he's Russian. He'll correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure. All right. Back to Afterburner. Bigger door, and it's now fixed with an extra screw that I could try to get to here. Yeah, there's an extra screw here that to make sure that this doesn't happen, and you can all thank Stefan for that because he broke this cowling like 30 times. On to the controversial things. The new XY joints use tooth idlers. Wow. So the idea was I kind of went down a rabbit hole on this one. All of this has been in development since Christmas. So we've had decent amount of testing and decent amount of time on all of this already. And the conclusion that we've come to is having tooth idlers here, or this is the pouch ones, or the gates ones, or actually just another set of F629, 695 doesn't actually translate into any kind of quality differences. There is slight ghost of a tooth riding over a smooth idler when you have just the bearings here. So the decision that we made is let's go with tooth idlers. And if you wanted to go with fancy tooth idlers, you can get the Gates ones for $3 a pop, and they fit here as well. And that was the reason I'm rebuilding this entire machine is the unification of the Gates version and the pouch version was like 3 days ago. So these are like brand new. Also, I had some silicone wire that like started poking out of the joints. So we're testing a different wire for the chains yet again. And just to, make sure that we're on the same page. If you're not having problems with your Voron, or you're not solving a particular problem that this will provide a solution for you, you don't have to upgrade. There's no forced upgrade march that we have. Anyway, but to work with the simplified XY joints, we have the new front idlers, tensioner. This is just the bearing now. The inset, the belt inset that we used to have has been removed because I figured out a way to thread the belt between these without interference. And these are a lot simpler now. It's literally just 3 parts, top, bottom, and this little bit right here. And the nice part is the tensioning happens with just this screw right here. Instead of coming in with 2 different screws and making sure that your idler is can't deliver properly, or basically fixing the tracking on the belt. Just 1 screw, set it, forget it, don't worry about it. Because we're switched to these nice little idlers here, there is now a quicker way to disengage your belts, which is you just pull the screw out, which just literally is essentially a threaded shaft. I understand we're using screws for shafts, and that's a no-no, but this is a 3D printer that's built in the garage. Let's calm down. Anyway, pull these out, pins pop, the idlers pop out, and all of a sudden your belts are loose, so you can work on your machine.
Hey RCF, do you want to talk at all about what happened to all of the pulleys on 5mm shafts with the F695 bearings on?
They're gone. Even on the that was the next thing I was going to say. Even the ZI have been replaced with just tooth idlers, and the main reason is the over complexity. I mean, the rallying call and the call to sanity was when we started modifying the idlers for AB, the XY joints. When the amount of custom engineering that you have to do to gets into like printed specialized tools and pushing things out and pinning custom flange on the back of it kind of got insane. And I think at some point somebody said, hey, these front idlers, these tooth idlers with a 5mm bore, we never tested those, did we? And the truth is we didn't. What happened was we had improperly mounted 16 teeth idlers on version 2 that exploded, and that were 3mm bore. And then when those exploded, we just basically went straight to, let's just put some bearings on there with a pulley, just to make sure that we can handle the load. And even on a bigger printers, these are not going to see enough load to snap those bearings. And the bearings, the F695 bearings, fail as well. The pins pop out. This cracks because you don't have enough. You have a hell of a lot more plastic now. Because, I mean, literally all the forces on the printer for moving the gantry are right here. This is the fulcrum point for the belts, which means the fulcrum point for all the force vectors. And having a little lip here that retains a bearing, just because we don't have clearance up here to hit it, was just... So essentially all the shafts on the gantry are gone. The shafts on the Z idlers are gone. And the only shafts remaining is a single shaft going down for the Z drives.
Those shafts in the XY joints used to, if you didn't have like the perfect tolerances between your bearing and your shaft, they would drill up or down through your XY joints, and you'd get cracking in them, and that was mostly caused by that.
Yeah, you get some weird
pin.
walking with those guys, especially on rapid XY changes. They just slowly work their way up through the parts. Yeah.
And because we lost some idlers like flat out, like the secondary idler on the front idlers is gone, and the direct drive and just more streamlined belt path. This is a hell of a lot easier to move now and a lot more smoother. So which translates into less wasted torque to move the gantry, which means you can move faster and you can move more reliably, which is the most important part. The Z chain is now mounted to the AB because having a little extra piece of plastic right here for no reason at all just didn't make sense.
And that's an off-the-shelf Z chain, correct? Not a printed chain.
This is an IGUS chain, yes. You can zip chain, the printed zip chain, which is kind of the budget version of this chain, has the and kind of like basically the ends that go into the extrusion have been extended to here, and they're 8mm apart now, to match the same kind of bolt pattern as the IGUS chains. So if you don't want to, and honestly, IGUS stuff is expensive. You can also use Ali chains. There are mounts for Ali chains, and I'm sure we'll have a version of the AB idler for the Ali chains.
Yeah, the China chains work. I'm running them onto mine. Yeah.
What else?
Yeah, those the iGoose chains are really nice. I mean, I know they're a little bit more expensive, but I mean they're just really headache free.
Yeah. And it's so
Now,
much.
due
Oh, go ahead.
but before I, we found the spacers that work. Okay, I think Dunar found the spacer that works. This is a stainless steel thumb nut that's M4. It works perfectly for making sure that, and the tolerances on these are fairly good because this is a DIN standard. They work. It just gives you a nice 9 or 8 millimeters of spacing between the bed, and then you don't have to make sure that your bed is perfectly milled. So the bed is perpendicular to or parallel to your bed rails, and it works much better.
Yeah, a lot of people the last time we had a Voron live were asking about the spacers on who is it? Nokel's printer, the one that was in the picture.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, those are the spacers. They're DIN rated, and because I had to raise the printer up a bit to fit T pulleys, the printed ADD pulleys with flanges. When this is finally done, I don't have these parts printed yet, but we actually get room for 60 millimeter fans, which is going to reduce the noise and improve airflow down at the bottom.
Speaking of down the bottom, did you discuss the spec on them yet, on the electronics?
Sure. We're thinking SKR 1.3 as kind of like the main. There's really no reason to go ramps at this point. All of this stuff has gotten super cheap. So SKR 12, SKR 13 with 229 drives. That's basically the recommended electronics packaging. Obviously, this will work with anything that you already have sitting around. Some people have duets. I know there's at least one dude that's sprung for Duet 3 because he's crazy. But yeah, pretty much any electronics. The mounting itself hasn't quite been figured out yet. We are currently toying with using DIN rail because that just makes everything cleaner. And most importantly, what the real goal, what I would love to do is be able to decouple the electronic mounting from the 150 millimeter spacing here. So then if you do have a bed that's not drilled for this bolt pattern, you can mount these further apart and put your bed down and keep printing. And all of this is an effort to make sure that this printer is more accessible and more, how do I say it, communal.
Adaptable.
Adaptable.
Yeah, you can put whatever size you need without having to rely on certain mounts for the PSU or whatever.
Yes.
I will say my VHB tape held it that PSU on the V2 from V2.0 to V2.2. So
nice.
Have you?
Before I stop talking about 2.4, let me turn it around here.
Did you mention the upper Z idlers?
Yep, I did. Well, I mentioned them briefly, but they're smaller now. They're no shaft. It's just a 30 millimeter screw. There's only one screw to tension them, right? So same as the front idlers, you're basically tensioning your belt with just one screw, which is a whole lot easier to get right. And you still lock it in with this one. And this is one printed piece, and there's a bracket that it screws into on the back here. Here. This right here. And this is specifically so then if you have these kind of joints or if you have a blind joints and you didn't do a good job of tightening this will prevent this extrusion from rotating this way when you put some tension on the belts. And then I think the last thing I want to mention is the new plug panel in the back. We have previously spec'd a filtered mains inlet. I don't know if that's gonna be. I don't think that's a right decision for the rest of the community. Those are to put it politically correctly. These outlets are available from reputable sources and a hell of a lot cheaper than filtered mains. You don't need a filtered mains inlet because for your PSU has it built in, unless your PSU was made by your grandma.
If you buy the spec one.
Yes,
Yeah.
if you buy the
Yeah.
main well, which isn't that expensive to be honest. And there's been some modifications to it. Don't worry about it. This is not the latest part. But now you have two keystone cutouts. So there's a blank panel here, and there's, my Cat 5 is here for my Raspberry Pi. They do make a USB keystone plug-in, but it's basically a standard keystone plug that goes in here. They do make a USB one if you want to put a USB extension for your Raspberry Pi, so you can plug things into your Raspberry Pi without USB port without having to take machine apart. I think that's it. Oh, there's a new
Z switch.
There's a new Z switch. And there's a space right. This is not the latest version. The latest part is sitting right there. The newest part that I haven't installed yet has the space to put one of those GST connectors on. And this was a community basically inspired mod. I don't think the guy did the mod for it. He basically just, filed it down and put a GST connector there. You can, when the switch is here and the 3-pin GST plug is here, you can connect the pins just with solder. You don't actually need extra wires. And then you basically have a plug socket in your Z to be able to disconnect it for easier wire management. So I don't quite I'm terrible with names, so I don't quite remember who the name of the guy that inspired this is, but he knows it, and hopefully he'll chime in. Thank you for that.
I found the photo in GChat. Christoph Mueller, I think it is.
Yep, there we go.
Yep,
that's it.
Thank you, Christoph Mueller.
I'll put that over in the Voron Live Q&A so people can see it.
Contributing to the printer development before even building his Voron.
Yeah, so you don't have to be a dev to contribute. You just have to have good ideas, and if you can implement them, and there's way too many things that we can't think of everything, so that's how it's working.
Right.
I mean, heck, most of the ideas I contribute are bad ideas, so...
we figured out, I forget what the statement was, like when Edison made the light bulb, he failed 99 times, so he said, I know 99 ways how not to make a light bulb. We found plenty of ways how not to make working printers. And
expensive ways.
Especially, that's what people ask us, have you tried this? We've said we've tested and it doesn't work. That's not a 10-minute test. This is something we've had probably 6 people print, run the tests on, do numbers and validate that while, yes, it does function, it doesn't gain us anything, so it doesn't make sense to work that way. So we've had a lot of ideas come in and out of the dev group that may work in the future, but currently that's not either viable, cost effective, or functional. So
yeah, and we revisit ideas constantly because sometimes we miss something, and sometimes we miss the documentation. We've lost documentation for the research that we did on it, and we're like, why did we try that? Why didn't this work again? And nobody says, I don't know. So then we do the testing, and we're like, oh, that's why it doesn't work. And then it goes back in the bin where it belongs.
Or it works good, like the idlers.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Quick question. I've seen somebody in Q&A. For the belts, what are we using for belt width on the 2.4 for Z or XY?
On the Z, you can use either 9mm or 6mm. There are 2 different versions of the idlers up top that let you align the belt. For the XY, it's 6mm only.
Okay. Hope that answers your question.
I've got a bunch of questions.
If you have a needle filer, Doomaroo was able to get 10mm belts on his Z.
Yeah.
That's his only he could find, right?
With enough sandpaper and beer, you can make it work.
You can make it work. Yeah, I couldn't wait for TriangleLabs. I wanted to do the upgrade, so I made it happen with what I could source in the UK.
Nice.
RCF, so I got a bunch of questions from earlier from Q&A. Could we just run those with you
Yeah,
real quick?
Let's do it.
So one of the key questions, obviously, is what the upgrade path is like from, say, 2.1 to 2.4 or from 2.2 to 2.4. I think the BOM is generally streamlined, right? We're not using as many screws as we did before, and we've got the change of the extrusion on the back. Maybe do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yes. So if you are running 2.1 right now, your direct path to 2.4 is a lot easier. Mostly because when you're upgrading from 2.2 to 2.4, you're going to be crying over a giant pile of parts that you'll never use again. Well, I think we have pictures
you'll use them in another printer.
Your second.
Sure.
Or whatever else we have to show off today, maybe.
Yeah. Stay tuned. So the upgrade path is, if you just want the gantry, get the gantry. It works with 2.1. It works with 2.2. If you want to go full bore and go with 2. Sorry, not Corona. Coffee going down the wrong pipe earlier episode. Yeah, if you want to use your existing Z, you can use the gantry completely. If you want to use just the direct drive AB motors and put an extrusion there, you just get the AB, throw it on there, and you just have direct drive. If you want to go full bore, you can, obviously. If you want the new nice front idlers, you'll also have to upgrade the XY joints. So you can't do a piecemeal upgrade, and I'm not quite sure in my head the matrix of how it interoperates, but there is a matrix where it all interoperates with minimal printing involved.
Yeah. So I can talk to that. I'm currently running 2.2 Zs, but the rest of the printers 2.4 for.
I mean, if you have the 2.2 Zs assembled and those hulking monsters, just keep running them, man. One last thing, speaking of Z, one last thing before I stop talking about 2.4. I'll probably never stop talking about 2.4. Anyway, I centered my Z rails on the extrusions. With 2.1 and 2.2, we had them a little inset, we had little printed guides, and you have to fiddle it. I just centered it. It's just centered. So you can use whatever extrusion you want for 2.4.
Great.
As long
Except
as it's not
V-slot.
Yeah.
Except V-slot. But even for V-slot, there's a mod that some dude made little brackets that go into the slot, and then you screw it's insane. I don't know. I think it's plus or minus 0.1 millimeter of accuracy.
But also, I think it's important to point out for that rear extrusion, right? You can use any extrusion on the back there because you're not securing rails, right?
You can basically
the
go
one that's
to
40 millimeter longer. Yeah.
You could use a piece of wood. You could use anything. It just needs to be structurally sound. It doesn't have to.
I wasn't going to go that.
Oh, come on.
Go that far, but.
No. I recommend that we take a bunch of spaghetti and epoxy it together.
We all have a ton of spaghetti right now. You all know that.
So you're saying I can use my Mars and just print a long tube and just stick that there? I'll be fine.
Of resin,
Yeah, you could just
great.
print an extrusion.
About 5 minutes after 2.4 release, there will be a printed jig thing available on
A
users.
40 millimeter piece.
Yeah.
Well, it's 20 on both ends.
Oh, that's
Yeah, it's a 20 millimeter cap that just screws in.
All right.
That
was one of the questions.
Somebody already did it, but somebody already did it.
Wow.
That was one of the questions: is will we need to use Masumi moving forward? So you just explained that no, you can look at B slot, right?
Nope. Yes, I hate being reliant upon a single supplier.
Yeah.
As long as it's 6 millimeters.
Yes, as long as it's 6 millimeter slot. If there will be parts available, because there's one dude that I know that's still running 5 millimeter slot from V1 days, which is Ampex, because that man is insane. Full frugal. Whatever.
There's a question about backwards compatibility with the afterburner beta. So I think you could continue to use the tool head, right? But you do need to reprint your XY joint.
Yes, the tool head remains the same.
Ish.
Actually, XY joints. Yeah, it's pretty
They'd
much
have
the same.
the front idlers, yeah. Would have to.
Yeah,
But you still.
You can run the new X carriage and the new AB without printing anything else. So if you just print the X carriage and the new AB parts. I forgot to mention on the new AB. There, you have the front bearing and you have the back bearing. Getting those perfectly has been kind of a challenge. So what happened was I just put a pivoting block that has a little bit of play in the back. So you rigidly mount this one. There's a pivoting block that secures to the second rail, and then when you're done, there's a screw that goes through it that you just basically tighten down and it stops. And the only reason we have dual rails on X is because we can't guarantee the tolerances on the manufacturing of China MGN rails. If you have rails that don't have any play in them whatsoever, you can run one. If you have high wind rails, you can just run one. I know people for a fact that basically flat out told me that the only way you're going to get a second X rail onto their printers if I come over to their house, beat them to death, and install it myself.
Question is: are there any plans for a large 400 millimeter, for example, cubed?
Can neither confirm or deny.
What do the timelines look like for the manual and so on?
So the idea is obviously the printer is not quite finished yet. There's the electronics to be figured out, and then there's a exhaust portion of it that I want to redo to be more 24 volt friendly, and actually work better. Tin's dad is a HVAC specialist, I believe, and he looked at our rear exhaust thing and said, that doesn't do anything. And I tend to agree with him.
Mine lights up. That's about it. So
nice.
I got fans with red LEDs on it.
Mr. Japan's dad said it doesn't fucking work.
I mean, it's not bad, but yeah, it could be better. It could be
better. Yeah. So that piece, the electronics, and the side skirts, and we should be good to go. The plan is to do kind of a staged release where we have. I know we said we wouldn't do that because we're gonna. Here's the whole release and here's everything. But we're all stuck at home and we have nothing better to do. So we'll release, the plan is to release the STLs and the BOM as soon as possible. Basically within 3 weeks for 2.4 so people can start printing. Oh, Mrs. Voron has arrived.
And ordering.
No. Thank you. Thank you, honey. Mm-hmm. She brings me a burger. I love her.
Oh. Thanks, Arthur. But I think I got all the questions. Yeah, I think I got all the questions from the chat. So if I missed any from YouTube or the QA chat in Discord, please ping me, and we'll talk about it later on in the. But
Okay.
thank you everyone for your questions so far.
Yeah.
And especially after this, we can go into the channels and people can ask questions. We can get a little bit more in depth. But this is kind of like an overview, see what we're working on, what we're going, and the direction we're headed. So.
Yeah. And there's like 100 or 300 other changes that I didn't mention that I forgot about literally because the machine was the reason it's called 2.4 is because I started with a fresh assembly and started adding pieces and redesigning them from scratch. A lot learning obviously from the lessons that we learned from the previous printers, but this is a scratch build design. We had a reset button. If you look at the BOM of 2.2, it's mind-boggling the amount of parts that ended up in there.
Especially with like you have a 12 millimeter, a 14, 15, 18, and if we can kind of minimize that, that was
that one Imperial screw that ended up in there.
Oh, yep.
Anyway, honestly, 2.2 wasn't as much fun to build as 2.1. 2.4 was more fun to build than 2.1. So
Yeah, no, having no belt coffins was a nice plus for any version of the printer.
Yeah.
right.
Trying to route those things with like a bent coat hanger, some needles, and just trying to like
Dental
feed
picks.
things, or sandwiching the belt in there and just trying to put the ice cream sandwich together and hope it doesn't explode out the sides. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've built two 2.4 prototypes so far, and this has gone so much quicker. I mean, wiring still is wiring, but it's a far faster and far more pleasing build. I used to say that I could build a 2.2 in the course of a weekend minus wiring. I could build a 2.4 in a day minus wiring now. Probably.
I swapped my gantry out in I think 3 hours, going from a 2.2 to a 2.4, and that's like machine off to machine back on, I think.
Yeah, and see, the one I did just recently was I went from a stack of extrusions, like totally clean slate, to fully built up in a day. So not just like leveraging, hey, I've already got the frame assembled and everything. It's clean sheet, 8-9 hours, and I'm, looking at just, running the wires at that point. So 2.4 to me is a huge win in terms of ease of assembly and also ease of adjustment and use and everything. So the new tooth dialers are 20 tooth, not 16. I just saw this come up in Discord. Sorry, Nomis.
It's also really cool how some of the parts kind of nest into each other, so they use the build volume while you're printing them very efficiently. When I saw that, it just kind of made me really happy.
Oh yeah, it's a lot easier. The whole print is a lot easier, and
totally.
Less material,
and you can
less
plate
time.
it. You can.
Oh yeah,
you
let's
can plate
talk
it
about the
really
amount of
tight.
plastic needed for this.
yeah,
I
I think we'll remove the spool.
Yeah, I haven't run the numbers lately, but last time I ran it, we dropped basically a full kilogram worth of plastic on the printed parts from 2.2 to 2.4. So that makes printing it a whole lot faster. I think on my 250, doing what I do for PIF, I went from 4 plates with the main colors and 2 plates for accents before talking about chains to, I want to say it's 3 plates, and plate number 3 was a super short one for main color and 1 plate for accents, and it was like 2 days less aggregate print time. So one thing I'll bring up, I don't know the number yet, but 2.4 PIF kits will be cheaper.
Yep.
We will make them cheaper for you to get into. 2.2 has a lot of moving parts and widgets and everything else that take a lot of time to do. 2.4 being easier, that's going to come back to you as well. 1.8 has, more simplified parts as well, and a lot of those have some cross compatibility with 2.4, so that makes it easier for PIF providers to standardize too. So I expect 1.8 PIF parts will also be cheaper. So we're looking really at taking cost out of this ecosystem everywhere we can, including if you can't print ABS, getting parts to you to get your printer built.
Yep. 2.4.
So what do we got next?
Was that Max?
2.4 is just a cheaper printer. It's more efficient, and it prints just as good as 2.2.
It's kind of like NASA back in the 90s. Faster, better, cheaper.
Yes.
So,
All right.
who wants to be the one to say the line?
I think Namgray should be the one.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Look at him. Look at him being all nervous.
drum roll.
Yeah. So we have another printer coming out. This is obviously RCF's been putting in a ton of work on 2.4 the last, since almost 6 months? Yeah. And it's been it causes kind of some of the other projects in the Discord to fall to the wayside, and this is one of the ones that I picked up, and No offense or anything. It's just sometimes they.
Oh no, you've done a fantastic job with it.
Yeah,
It's
this was a
in
channel
development for a while.
that was in development for a while, and there was basically I just started scraping the channel and said, what is going on with this thing, and pulling pictures of RCF stuff, and basically we ended up with this.
Ooh, he's so cute.
Here we go.
This is the Voron Zero. So it's I got some specs on it here. I'll pull up my little sheet.
Oh, it lights up.
Quick. Oh yeah, it's got all sorts of good stuff.
Oh my god, it has a hat.
It's so pretty.
Yeah, so it's a Core XY motion system, just like all the other Vorons. The build plate is it's 120 millimeters by 120 millimeters, and then 120 also in the Z. And the cool part about that is that every part from the V2, every functional part of the V2 and the V1 can be printed on this build plate.
Yep.
So
and every part of this printer can print it on its own build plate.
Correct. Yeah. Minus my little top hat here. That's still a beta part, so we're still kind of messing with how that works. But it will have. It is a fully rep wrap design. So again, yeah, it's the one the hot ends that it supports. I have that written down. It does not support the groove mount V6, and I know that's gonna bum some people out, but this groove mount thing is just too big. It does support the threaded one, so if you have the threaded V6, with the nut here, you can use that one. So there's still a budget-friendly option. We have tool heads for the Dragon and for the Mosquito. Mine's running a Mosquito right here, but. We'll talk about the build plate first, I guess. There's a really cool, it does have a spring steel build plate. These are made by Energetic. So they have a nice, just happened to sell that exact size, which is pretty sweet. It's the same, it uses a Mix 6 bed. It's 6 millimeters thick instead of the 3/8. You don't need quite as much just because the plate is so much smaller, and it's running an AC Kinovo heater, just like the V2 and the V1 setups. It doesn't have a probe. There's no bed leveling, auto bed leveling. It uses manual bed leveling, which, to be honest, it's not that big a deal. The plate is so small that, I mean,
it's this big.
Yeah, it stays level, especially with the Mix 6 plate. You're already getting a super flat surface, so don't let that scare you. It works really well.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to run a mesh or anything on it. It's just small enough that that you'll be fine.
What extrusions are those?
The extrusions. The frame is Maker Beam. Every piece of the frame uses these 200 millimeter 15 by 15 Maker Beam profiles. They're no, you don't have to cut any of them to size. You just buy them. They're already at the length. You do have to do some drilling for some blind joints. But again, just like with the V2, the blind joint drilling is just access holes for your Allen wrench. So, I have some on the side here that I moved around 3 or 4 times, so they look like a tiger chewed on them. So they don't have to be nice looking, Let's see. It uses MGN7 rails, 2, 3, 5 of them for the motion. On the X and Y is done with those. The Z uses 2 down at the bottom, and then it's just a lead screw that moves the bed up, the cantilever bed up and down. And the motors in this one are NEMA 14 motors. So smaller motors, smaller everything.
And we've got we've been using the SKR Mini E3 with the 2209s for the controller, right?
Yep. I was going to move to electronics next. Yeah, it uses the SKR Mini E3 and a 100 watt 24 volt power supply. And then it runs on, and then a Raspberry Pi. So the setup is it's running Clipper. It's a very similar setup to the guide that Eddie put together. I actually nicked a bunch of your stuff from that guide for the V0 setups guide.
Go for it. Yep.
Yeah, it's really helpful. It also uses a new extruder too, which I don't really have good views of. I know someone said they might have one hanging around, but it uses an extruder that we call the Pocket Watch, which is essentially just the guts from the afterburner, but mounted to a NEMA 14 motor instead of the other one, and then stuck in the back here. So it uses kind of an umbilical cord Bowden setup up there. Yeah. We got any questions about it? I guess I'm not. What do you guys want to know?
Let's take a moment to give a round of applause.
Awesome work. We're picking up a project that had cobwebs written all over it, and having something that came together so wonderfully and with so few revisions to all the parts. It was one and done on everything.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. One and done. I remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Just like any other Voron part. What's the unofficial logo for the Voron development team? The recycling bin?
Yeah, throw it in the bin.
By the way,
But this wasn't so painful because you could print two of them on one plate. So
there you go.
This is MG9 and this is MG7.
That's cool.
Oh yeah,
they're really cute. It's amazing.
And these are amazing. They're super precise.
M2 screws are fun as well if you've got big hands, like it's
yeah. Let's see, can I get mine out of my box?
But I will say it's a fun build, and if you've got kids, I built mine with my I built some of it with my son, and it's a fun little build, and he wants it now in his bedroom. So I think that's where it's going to end.
So it's and NEMA 14 motors are just quiet. Period.
Yeah, I mean
they're just quieter than 17.
That matched with the 2209s. I was running 12-volt ramps on my printer for up until yesterday, and when I installed these 2209s, I remember typing in the chat, just holy shit, you can't hear anything on these things. So it's a quiet printer, and it's like Dreadnought said, it's a fun build. It is very particular. You do have to do things in a certain order because the Maker Beam profile has those goofy looking T slots. Yeah. All your nuts are preloaded. You don't get to put them in after the fact.
Standard M3 nuts, right? Standard M3.
Yeah. Yep, use the standard M3 nuts.
And there is no way to do. I mean, we tried coming up with a design for a post insertion hammerhead, and I have a design for it, but it's fiddly at best. So having the pre-insertion ones and getting all those in is kind of key.
Yeah, so there is a definite order of operations for putting it together, but it is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I only took mine apart, I think, 24 times when I was building it. So
here, let's see if I can get some
close-ups.
Yeah,
I'm so happy this thing is finally going out the door.
Yeah,
this was the development on this started before I moved into this house, which was over a year ago, and then it got basically left on the ground until Nimgria found it on the floor and picked it up and said, "What's this? I want to finish."
And a lot of us said, "We have no idea," and then he kind of came up with what you see.
Right. I mean, when I left off, it was literally just the frame and maybe the mock-up of the Z.
Yeah, it was a rough idea. Like here's placeholders for everything.
This is 100% his driven project. He did an amazing job.
But it still maintains the Voron design aesthetic, I think, with the smooth edges, sharp corners, hexagons all over the place.
It's amazing. I may have some pictures saved of like Rev 1 of this thing from like 2 years ago or a year ago.
I mean, that's mostly how the development of it went. It was me, typing into the Discord search, posts by Russian cat food that contain images, and then just looking through them all and seeing, all right, what was he trying to do here? You know, what was going on here? Oh, maybe I can.
Oh yeah, we can do all the unlisted videos of the first prints and everything we've got going on. All the testing. Oh yeah, oh wow. Yeah, RCF, you take a look in the live Q&A channel, you can see your original mock-ups for V0. That had the belted Z, remember? Holy crap.
Oh, Jesus. I remember, yes.
And I think that's a ramps or a rearm, I can't tell, in the back there.
Yeah, I know it's going to come up, but the reason this doesn't have a belted Z and uses a lead screw, lead screws are much cheaper and more compact at this.
Yeah, at this scale, it didn't make sense to have two pulleys, the belt, the hook. With this, you just have the lead screw, which is both a guide and axially loaded, which is fine. So,
and your bed won't drop.
Yeah, I will say these maker beams, while they are tiny, when they're bolted together, this printer's not going anywhere. It's incredibly sturdy. But even, I think every joint is metal to metal. I don't think we have any joints that are floating with plastic between. So the frame is just a solid piece.
There's plastic up on these ones here, but these are not.
Those aren't structural. Yeah, those
are
are
not
more
structural. They're more just to give it a top.
Yeah, to give it a full ridge across the top. But
yeah.
And the belts being not exposed to the elements, or it was kind of the original idea for a V0. I wanted to have a printer I can build with my daughter eventually when she's old enough, and basically have that be her printer, obviously printed in paint. But anyway, that's the safety factor, and I mean, dude, the execution on this. This is amazing, man. Well done. Good job.
Yeah, I will say, as much as that top hat is extraneous, I think it makes the printer look freaking amazing because it's a fully enclosed. It's got the lights. You get the refraction off there. And is it still the case that the 4 angled panels on the side are actually still straight walls, or are those angled as well?
I'm sorry. What?
The panels on the top hat, are those straight walls or are those angled? I don't remember.
They are. Shoot, what's the word?
They did
tapered.
Have an angle.
Parallelogram.
Yep.
Trapezoid.
Trapezoid.
Okay.
Trapezoid.
They are trapezoid, but we do. So one of the things. Shoot, I put the camera back on. The bed. The bed uses 100 millimeter maker beam pieces. And you can actually order those 100 millimeter maker beam pieces. And one of the caveats is they come with these little 50 millimeter pieces. The way that the bed ones are mounted, you don't have to have the bot. You know, they don't have to be perfect cuts on the end. You can cut one of the 200s in half if you don't want to buy the other ones. But we do have a version of the top hat that uses those little 50 millimeter extrusions. And then all straight, everything's square then up top. There's no angles, so it's a lot easier for someone to make, garden tools in their garage sort of thing. But I know it's
with garden tools.
Yeah, there you go. I know it's going to come up just like the other ones did, but when is this releasing? So the plan is to have the manuals and the assembly manual for both the machine and the pocket watch, and then the instructions for the electronics and stuff out at the same time as the 1.7, or sorry, the 1.8 and the 2.4. So like the 2-ish week time frame. However, I'm thinking that we can, for the people that want to jump into it, the BOM and the STLs, I'm going to try and have those ready to go by this weekend. So.
Very nice work.
So while you're waiting on your parts from AliExpress, you can print the V0 and then wait for more parts on AliExpress.
Yep.
Doc, what is the print time for V0?
I can actually,
Mr. Pitt.
So if you have a 300 plus build size on your main printer, you can do all of the V0 main parts on a single print that's about 18 hours, and then it's another 5 hours, I want to say, worth of accents. If you
That's
do
about right.
if you do everything, and they will all fit on a 300 plus size bed. So if you do it all same color, it's 22 hours worth of print time in aggregate. So you could theoretically turn out a set of parts for this in a day. One thing also I'll mention is you see all those clever panels and whatnot. Those panels are printable. So you could
the bottom panel, the back panel,
Yep.
those panels. I mean,
So
Yep.
if you
We're releasing. I'll release. We have a whole because the crazy thing about this printer is I think the first 6 of them at least that were built by you guys. I don't think anyone has the same setup as far as electronics.
No, I've got
Oh, God, no.
panels in my side because you can actually get if you get 3mm panels or 1/8" panels, you can actually get 1/8" ABS.
Right.
Actually, let me grab mine, and you can actually fit it. I don't know if you can see this that well, but you can fit the panels into the slots of the extrusion, so you
that's
get
how my
something
deck and my
that looks nice. But then again, I think people have panels on the outside, clear panels on the inside, panels going up. So there's
a lot
many
of
different
room
ways
for-
you can do it. There's many ways to skin
there's
a cat.
a lot of
so.
ways to do it. And so we have basically a whole folder in the repo of crew mods, things that people said, hey, I like the printed deck plate, so here's that STL, and that's all going to be released with it. So you've got your like main spec sort of stuff, as loose as a term as we can use for that, but then all the crew mods that go with it of stuff that people have done that they liked and thought were cool, those will all get dumped up when the STLs go up at the same time too, which will also include some of the beta stuff like this top hat and the other top hat with the 50s and just a couple of things that we're trying out because again, getting it into people's hands and seeing what they come up with is really one of the best ways to push the stuff a little, push it forward.
Where did we think the pricing lands, Nem?
Oh, yeah. So I'm confident to say that if you have to buy every single piece for this brand new, and a lot of the stuff on here does cross nicely with the V2 bomb. So if you've already built a V2, you probably have some of the parts that it's using already. But I can comfortably say that you could get all the parts for under $400.
assuming you don't buy a mosquito. This is threaded V6.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe a dragon.
But still, 400 is a awesome price point compared to.
And
what-
I think it's a little maybe. Oh, okay. I reckon you can put it together for a little bit less than that. I mean, I did some different things. Like I used a DC bed instead of an AC bed. I used a slightly slimmer tooling plate. I mean, there's
Right. And I mean, a lot of that too will come down to just, to be honest, I bought a lot of my parts off of Amazon because I wanted it now, and you
Right.
pay that extra premium. So
the Amazon Premium to get them, yeah, especially the panels and feet and stuff. Like you can wait 3 weeks to get the 4 feet you need, but like if I spent $8 now, I can have them Amazon tomorrow, and that's kind of how a lot of this build went. Is I need them now.
Yeah.
And we should talk about group.
now.
We'll probably talk about group buys on some of this stuff as well, and maybe particularly in Europe because I probably bought enough parts to actually build 4 of them. So I think it'll work. We can work some out. We've got the store here already, TriangleLabs, and we should look at how we can help people get hold of Make a Beam XL if you can't get it. But from what I've seen, they ship globally, so it seems pretty easy to get hold of the extrusions.
We've also, I think we have a deal with Energetic. If we order like 10 plates, we can get the Voron logo.
It was MOQ 30. So yeah, he said, if we do a group buy for the 120 flex plates, which I think we should easily be able to achieve, we can get logoed flex plates.
So I've actually been talking with Lol Module too. I just posted something in the Voron Live Q&A. Lol has actually done some work on etching aluminum plates for the V0 bed. This is something that hopefully we were going to get to at MRRF, going to show off all these printers and everything that was there. But he was able to, with some vinyl decals, acid etch the beds and you could put them on the bottom. You could put them on the top especially if you're doing PEI. You can put the PEI right on this and get a nice underlayment. So, but yeah, in conjunction with the Energetic or whoever for the spring steel, you get the logo there. Really depends. So, I just wanted to show that he was so excited about being able to get this etching working with vinyl decals. So
yeah,
it's
for sure.
Pretty
So-
damn cool looking print bed.
There's questions about PIF for V0. There
Mhm.
will be PIF for V0. Originally, when we were going to Murph, I had grand designs on there being a giveaway. And because Murph isn't happening, this is a problem. So the first 5 V0 kits I do will be done at no cost other than shipping for the person who gets them. How the 5 people will be determined is TBD, but I will be giving away 5 PIF kits for V0s to people in the US. These will be unique. I have a palette that I'm borrowing from Eddie, so you will have color schemes in your accents that no one else will ever see again. So stay tuned there.
That's a good teaser.
I don't know if you have my screen up, Doc, or not, but I have the pocket watch. Oh,
Yeah,
okay, you
looks
do.
like it's up.
Good.
Yep, CAD's up.
Yeah, so that's the extruder that the V0 uses. It's basically the guts of a BMG, a Bondtech BMG, and I attached it to a NEMA 14 instead. And that was basically by necessity. The 17s just don't fit.
Hey Doc, do you want to throw me up on the main screen? I have it installed on mine.
It's Uber Nero.
It's
me. The first person who had the Z working on the V0.
Yeah, I had this work. Oh
Here.
God, I
Oh
can.
God. So one thing I will say is if you look at the bomb, be very specific to it because there are 2mm pitch, 4mm pitch, 8mm pitch, and I managed to have somehow 2 different lead screws and 2 different nuts, but none of the 4 of them work together in the right way. So I had like a 2mm pitch. So I was messaging Doc. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Why is this not working? And sure enough, he sent me lead screw or the lead nuts, and they worked fine. So.
Yep. I will say if you're in the US, the lead screw from Ziltech is very, very cheap, and they ship quickly. Here are some of the prototype multicolor accents for this that will be included in the giveaway. So, and yes, I do also have the Rasta Special set.
Hi, Mon. That was terrible. Oh, look, the bed. And 3 points, because 3 points make a plane.
There you go. Yeah. Most of that was because you guys had already decided how you were going to drill the bed before I even got started on this project.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think my bed was done 1.5 years ago.
Yeah, I had the aluminum sitting around for a while with the holes drilled.
So I know I might not have touched on this when I was talking about it, but you're probably looking at it going, well, where the hell is the Z switch? There's a little hole back here, and that hole ends up hitting your Z end stop. So essentially, you put a screw in here, and that's how you can fine tune your Z height. So
And
it does
especially
have a
with
Z end
Clipper-
stop.
Yeah, and with clippers built in screw leveling, like you can center the nozzle over the screws or tell it where it is, level it until
Yep,
it's
there's
paper test, and it'll tell you
there's
exactly how much to move each one. So
not in this one. The bed macro for the manual one. The way it works is you type in I think it's bed screw adjust,
Yeah.
And it'll go on top of each of these 3 points, and then you essentially just run the paper test at each point, and then your bed is leveled. Really quick to do, especially with the screws coming from the bottom or whatever. You don't have to worry about accessing that head with the tool head on top of it. Works really good.
Hey Doc, do you want to throw me up on the main screen here? I got
Yep.
mine. I can flip it around.
Yep. Uno momento. All right. There we go.
Okay, so shitty lighting because I'm in my computer room, but that's kind of the bed right there. So I think, or I don't know if we're going to adjustable underneath or screwing right into the bed, but the original design was screwing directly into the bed for mounting it. So that's how mine is set up.
It can be done. Yeah, it can be done both ways. If you don't want to buy a tap or you're worried about tapping aluminum, you can just drill straight through the aluminum, same way that the V2 bed is mounted, and the screws can go down and you can use thumb nuts, or you can screw up into the bed. Multiple ways to do it right there. It's either way.
Yeah, and then on the back, the pocket watch is right there. Your Z motor, AB. I believe we're going with the Raspberry Pi mounted on the back.
Yep.
I have a buck converter because I have 12-volt fans. Everything else is 24-volt. Then on the bottom, I have a 100-watt power supply. I've got my SKR Mini. I've got a very small SSR here. And then I think that's it on the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is pretty tight when it comes to the wiring on this. You don't have as much room on a V2, for example, than on this thing.
Yep.
And you can run a DC powered, especially if you're doing 24 volts, you can run a DC powered bed on it, and you still have beef in the power supply to be able to drive.
Yeah, that is one thing because the first bunch I don't know if we finally finalized a standard for electronics, but for example, like mine, my power inlet's on the side. We don't know if we're going to go with run an external brick. You can run an external brick if you want for your power supply instead of having the mains underneath. There's a lot compared to the other Vorons, V1 and the V2s. There's a lot of ways going about how you build this thing.
Yeah, like I've got a build in progress right now that's going to be using a Duet because I've got one spare, a 150-watt power supply, and a 60-watt 24-volt bed. So everything's just going to be all DC all the time in that. But the one that you saw in my lap a minute ago, or better yet, here we go. This one is running a mains bed. So, I mean, there's a multitude of ways to skin this cat.
Yeah, we totally weren't just using up all the spare parts we had lying around.
Nope.
That's the third one I'm building is using up all the spare parts.
And I believe MakerBeam is originally from Europe, right?
Yes, they are.
Poland. Yes, they're in Europe.
UK, I believe.
So there are other options. MakerBeam is pretty expensive in Canada. Don't even try Amazon Canada. You're going to spend way more. You can buy it from Amazon US and get it shipped up. You can buy it from MakerBeam directly, pay the duties and whatnot. It's still not horrible. Misumi 1515 also works. You just have to cut it. Well, you can pay them to cut it, but you'll have to tap it yourself. So if you're ordering a whole order or buying a V2 and want to throw in rails for a mini or V0, you can do that. There's also open beam, but they don't come stock in 200 millimeters. They come stock at 210 millimeters, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah. MakerBeam's out of the Netherlands in Europe.
I think that's what Andrek ended up. That's why he ended up with 210.
Yeah. So
Trash Panda.
You need 200 millimeters. You need 100 and then 250s, I believe.
No,
it's three 100s.
And again, with those 100s,
and cut them.
Yeah, again with those 100s, you don't have to have nice cuts on them. If you take one of your 200s and cut it in half, the way that it's mounted up with this front block, it can be a rough cut, and you're fine.
Yeah, minute of hacksaw.
Oh, and for mounting, some stuff we have mounts for, like the Raspberry Pi, but all the stuff on the bottom of mine, I have an ABS sheet that's held within the extrusions, and I just have nylon, like PCB standoffs you would have for a motherboard, screwed to that.
Yep.
And that's it. So it's just literally held in by the bottom plate.
So now that people are sufficiently mind blown, do you have any questions in the chat room for V0 field?
Lots of positive comments. Looks very cute. People are excited about it. So, and yeah, just to say again, it's a really fun build. So,
yeah, and again,
Someone's
I've been
asking how quick V0 is, how quickly it can go, how fast.
V2 speeds.
yeah, V2 speeds.
Yeah, Uber Nero, me, we're all printing. I'm printing with my exact, with basically the exact same profile that I use for my V2. I did up the part cooling because the ducts are a little smaller. But other than that, I'm running the exact same stuff that I run on my V2.
Yeah, I'll say that I knocked my accelerations down a little bit, but part of that is you've got such a small area, you'll never be able to hit, super high accels anyways.
Yeah, you're not gonna hit them that high.
And so, yeah, someone asked, and I'll just say it now, that someone made a comment about PIF on a V0, like doing kits for something else. It turns out for a 2.2, you can do all the 2.2 parts for PIF on a V0. That may or may not have been intentional. And 2.4 for sure. It takes 12 plates to do all of your main colors. So there may or may not be a reason why I'm building 2 or 3 of these things.
This is an homage to Uraniro and printing his V1 parts on his MP Mini.
Oh God.
Yeah, gee. How long did that take you?
I think 2 weeks for V1.55, which never existed.
We don't talk about that.
Someone was asking if you can use the ramps on V0. Sure.
If you can make it fit, you can use it.
Yeah, but like the thing is, the SKR Mini E3, it's $20. It's so much better for that money.
It's $20 and it comes with the drivers built into it. So
Yep. I started off with an SKR, but it's worth the money, like really.
I see somebody's asking about Orange Pi. I did buy one, like the Orange Pi Mini.
We did.
These are much smaller.
We tried a couple. Yeah, we tried them. The issue came up is that there's actually like 2 different kinds of Orange Pi, right? Like a H5 and an H3 or H2 or something.
I got the older one with the shitty Wi-Fi, and by the time I got it working, I just said screw it and threw a Raspberry Pi 3 in mine.
Right.
But theoretically, they should work.
It's definitely doable.
Yeah, I got the H5 working. And I think, let's see here. I think Me to You I think he bought 2 or 3 of them. I think he has them running too for another project. But yeah, so it is possible. It does take more, it is more tedious since, there's not an Octopi image that you can just drop on the Orange Pi. You have to run more terminal commands. But, depending on how things go, someone might make a guide for setting that up. But it isn't expressly necessary. In this case, it's just a cool, cool alternate.
Yeah, and the Raspberry Pi 3A is probably a perfect match for this because it has the Pi 3's horsepower and it's about half the size. And we normally wouldn't use it on a V2 because it only has one USB port. Here, we only need one USB port. So we're off to the races.
So never mind. Someone posted in the Q&A channel, how many motors do you need? I got some extras laying around. You need 4 NEMA 14 motors. It is a little, we did run into some issues if you're not buying the specific one in the bomb. where you might have to play with your accelerations and stuff to not get them, skip steps and everything, or to keep the heat manageable.
Yeah, I have motors that will probably be sitting on a shelf for years because they either would skip steps at acceleration rates that I just found unacceptable in a Voron, or they were getting so hot you could fry an egg on them. NEMA 14s, that what we're trying to do with them, there's ones that work and they work just fine, and there's ones that just do not work.
RCF, someone is asking on Discord if you can use the 2.2x carriage on 2.4.
Maybe. I believe you can. The belt spacing is a little different because we added basically a millimeter of spacing between the top and the bottom belt. So if you file the belt openings a little bit so the belts line up better. Otherwise, yeah, I don't see why not. It's the same as far as the belts. The belt spacing from the extrusion is the same. The only thing we did is I spaced them out a little bit better because I needed to line everything, reline everything. This things got kitty wampus a little bit.
Yep. One thing I'll throw in. So if you're paying attention in the Q&A channel, you may have seen the etched bed that LOL Module did. The chat's been going fast and furious, so it's at 4:04 p.m. my time, and so whatever time it is, 04 for you. But that's a picture of the etched bed. He had 5 of those made. Those 5 are getting included in the giveaway kits for the first 5 PIF kits I send out for this. So not just pretty cool accents, but you're getting a close to one-of-a-kind bed, which you have to admit, that looks baller.
Indeed.
What is the build time on a V0?
I don't think we...
None of us had timed that because we all built the bed and then realized, I've got to take it all apart again to put the rails on. So there's a very specific order of operations to build this printer that we'll be fully documenting in the manual. So it should go a lot smoother for you guys with the manual than it did for us trying to piece it together from the CAD.
Yeah, because no one here has built it with the manual. We've all built it with the CAD or without anything.
Yeah, just winging it. I was
V2.0.
Yeah, I was not being hyperbolic when I said I built it and took it apart about 25 times. It just, one more M3 nut needs to go there. Fuck.
Mm-hmm.
Mine has like 2 or 3 loose M3 nuts in the extrusions that I would have to take apart to take them out. So I just deal with.
Yep, that's like my V1.
You want to take them out?
Inserted.
I'm just going to glue them in place. They're going to live there now.
Drill a nut access hole and use a magnet.
Yeah, no, they're from the old Z position. So I'd have to take all the electronics out to get a drill in there.
Dremel disc in the slot, cut them in half.
Yeah, I had nut access holes drilled in mine, so I can drop them in at certain points, as opposed to taking it apart at certain points.
Genius idea.
That's nice. Can I talk about threaded inserts for a second?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of grief given to us for the inserts. So there are basically 2 de facto standards on the 3 de facto standards on the inserts. We have the North American standard, which is 5.2 millimeter, and they're manufactured by EZ Law. There's a variation, AliExpress variation that CNC Kitchen did that they're supposed to be for 3D printing. And then the ones that we actually ended up using, and I'm using on my machine throughout at this point, are the AliExpress 5 millimeter ones. And they come in a bag of 100 and they're cheap. And that's what we're standardizing on. And the reason we're standardizing on that is because that is available to everybody on this planet. The idea, again, is to make sure that this printer is able to be built with parts you can source from anywhere. And basically having, unicorn parts that you can only source from that one shack in Canada is not ideal. So I went through and made sure, and I'll do it, double check again. I'll make sure that every hole is spec'd for basically the AliExpress 5mm threaded inserts. And if you have the North American, the Easy Lock-in, you can either drill the hole out or just mash it in there and then, cut the plastic, the little flashing that you end up getting from, when you're inserting a bigger threaded insert into a hole that was meant for a smaller insert. Little plastic pops out. You can just cut it off with a knife to make it flush. Oh, and then the last part is there was a question about why we're not using the ever ubiquitous molded in inserts, which basically have, let's see if I can get, hold on a second, let me get one. So these are the inserts that we ended up kind of standardizing on. I don't know if you guys can see that very well. I mean, full screen myself so I can do it. See what I'm doing.
Doc has to full screen you.
Yeah, these are the inserts that we ended up going with, and these are the AliExpress 5mm inserts. They're nice. They are meant for insertion into plastic with either ultrasonic installer or soldering iron, basically. And they melt in, they stay in there, and they don't go anywhere. These over-molded or molded inserts don't work. Again, CNC Kitchen did a whole video on these inserts and said, oh, well, these don't have as much pulling strength. But he never actually went into the reasons why. And the reasons why is these are meant to go into a plastic mold before the plastic is flowed in. And if you put these into a plastic mold and then inject plastic into the mold, the plastic will go all around these little things and basically retain the insert into your plastic. And then the little ridges prevent it from torquing out when you're screwing something in. If you insert this, obviously, if you insert this post-install, you don't get that benefit from these. And this is why we're not using these guys. They'll pull out. So hopefully that maybe clarifies some decisions that we made on the threaded inserts. The threaded inserts allow us to do many more things that basically we can't do with nut traps. Simply because we either don't have space for nut traps, or you have to we'll have to spec like a 55mm long screw just to reach where the nut would be originally. And that's my threaded insert soapbox. I'm done now.
So, yeah, I think that's all we had up our sleeves. So, yes, the V naught is because it was V0. And yes, I was screwing with everyone. I'm not sorry. Decisions were made. I was amused.
It's big because you can stack them in a cube. So if you want a wall of printers, you can just stack V knots, and then you would have a battleship of print.
Ooh.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
When we were going to go to Murph, we were going to make a frame of V0s and do like 4 in a row or a box of like 8 of them or something like that. But obviously that never happened. So.
Yet.
Might still
Murph next
happen.
year.
Because we still haven't gotten a refund for our boot space. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming it's still happening at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I know just so you know, we were going to have 2 booths at Murph this year. So not just one, but 2 booths back to back with each other. And there were going to be like 10 of the development team all at Murph, and I think we had like 6 or 7 printers scheduled to be there on top of these releases and announcements. So this threw a monkey wrench into a lot of what we were hoping for. So hey, we wanted to share though with the world that, you know, just because we're locked up in our homes right now doesn't mean we don't have something cool for you guys to work on while you're cooped up.
Well, I'd argue that because we are locked, now is the perfect time to build a 3D printer, because what else are you going to do?
Yep. So
other than spend time with your family.
So with that, I know we were planning on it this being an hour. We're now 2 hours and 38 minutes into this. I consider
that's
that still a
normal.
success. So yeah, I think we can wrap up unless anyone else has anything else. I don't see anything. So, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone in the community, for everything you've done. Thank you, Eddie, Nimgria, and RCF for your work on all these releases. And until next time.